So, do you have a plan to retire or exit from your business? The latest survey from IBBA about businesses ranging from 500,000 to 50 million in revenue, people don't have an exit plan. And this isn't surprising. If you plan to retire or exit one day, it's super important to have a plan. Alex Teece is here today. Alex has spent the last 15 years as an entrepreneur, leader, and a consultant. He was a Zuckerman Fellow at Harvard University, and he holds 5 degrees, including a doctorate in leading organizational growth. And he wrote a book called Surviving Succession. So at the end of this video, Alex will give us 3 things that you can do to start planning your exit. So, Alex, thanks for being here. For people who haven't read the book, what's the core message of Surviving Succession?
To start planning for your succession. That is inevitable, unless you want to work till you're 100 years old, which I can't imagine anyone who's watching this wants to. So at some point, you're going to look up after having worked really hard for the past several decades. You're going to look around and you're going to see your employees who are following you, your loyal customers who are buying from you, and you're going to say, how do I hand this off and what do I do? And really, my message throughout today, and I'll wrap this up in 3 succinct points at the end, is that small steps and something that is good is better than waiting to get something perfect, because it just will never happen. And you'll find yourself saying, I wish I had done something earlier. So really my message is to start now and start with something. Small steps often lead to that big moment, which you'll be glad that you planned for.
So, Alex, what motivated you to write this? Was there a specific moment when you realized that business owners were completely unprepared for succession?
Well, in my personal life, I had led an organization. I had 50 employees. We had about a $5-6 million budget. We had just done a very large municipal bond deal. And I realized that it was my time to step aside and let the organization grow without me. And we didn't have a plan. And as I spoke to our board and our major donors and some of the founding employees who had been with me all along, they said, well, you can't leave. What are we going to do? And I started researching what some of the best companies and organizations and universities in the world have done. And they've put together plans to ensure that leaders can gently step to the side, advise, and hand off what it is that is most important, which is their business, their legacy, their employees, their customers. And that moment, I think, sneaks up on us sometimes. And it certainly caught me, I don't want to see completely by surprise, but I don't know that any leader is ever ready to sign off for the last time or log out of their email or throw their keys on their desk or say goodbye for a final time. We're just conditioned as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as founders to commit and to show up every day. And it's hard to imagine a different reality.
So, you hear a lot about exit planning. So,
Mm.
you write about succession planning.
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between the two?
Sure. The way I delineate between the two is an exit plan is really your business plan, your finance plan to quote unquote get out and survive. I think this is where EBITDA multiples and buying and selling, more transaction comes into play. Succession is more about leadership, management, legacy, all of the what some people might refer as the softer side of your business, but it's really the core and the DNA of what actually achieves the financial outcomes. So it really is an input focused approach to building a plan for you to survive that moment of transition from which you were the leader in the center to now you are on the sideline and watching your business grow and go on without you.
So, how does an owner decide if they choose to do a succession plan versus an exit plan?
I think people should do both. And I think that both can live in harmony. If you think about the nuts and bolts of a business, you think about what needs to be thought about in terms of getting quote unquote getting out. It's important to consider the financial implications of someone leaving, right? And I think in a publicly traded company, there's some studies out there that show the shareholder value that is lost in moments of leadership change announcements, right? I mean, no one's sitting there waking up one day and saying, I want Jamie Dimon to leave or Jeff Bezos to leave or whoever is leading all of the major companies in the world, because there's some stability baked into their leadership, their management, their vision, the people that they've brought in and built around them. And that change in that moment, I think, presents a little bit of risk. So it behooves leaders and founders, entrepreneurs to have that exit plan, that business component to make sure that, okay, the X's and O's of the actual business are taken care of and are at least protracted out into the future. The
Mhm.
succession plan, like I said, is much more focused on the inputs, is much more focused on the strategy, is much more focused on the leadership and management of that organization. The two can and should live closely together in harmony, and they can if they're developed alongside of one another.
So the succession plan and the exit plans, what's the timing of each of those? Like I see exit plans a couple years in advance. Do you
Sure.
succession plan?
Sure. There are a lot of studies and a lot of recommendations out there that offer people various time horizons. I will say that the rule of thumb is usually 2 years to give someone 2 fiscal years, 2 full cycles to get ready to quote unquote leave. So if you think you want to retire by January 1st, 2028, you have all of 2026, all of 2027 to put into place not just the people and the processes that you want to see your business operate on, but if you want to get paid on your exit, if you want to sell to someone, that takes a long time. And that due diligence period and kind of the back and forth that we see with small business leaders, not just from a mathematical and a financial and a tactical standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint. It's hard for an owner to wrap their mind around what is their business valued? When do they actually want to leave? When do they feel like they are ready, their people are ready, their buyers are ready? So, 2 years, I think, is rule of thumb. That being said, in the book, I write about a 90-day succession plan, and I've written a few articles around that. You don't want to say, I'm gone in 3 months, but say you have to be. Say there's a death in the family, or you realize that you have to move for some reason, or someone comes along and says, I will buy your company, but I'm going to buy it only 90 days or on day 89. Then you have to kind of get going. So I break it down to the really key core components of self, team, and business in the book and in some of the literature that I've been studying and writing.
So why do you think that smart, experienced owners procrastinate about this?
It's a good question. I don't want to speak for every business owner out there. We're not monoliths. It's not a monolithic demographic of folks who start and run their businesses. But I will say, and I don't know who had that quote, the two things that we can't escape are death and taxes. As a business founder and owner, something you will not escape is one day you will not lead your business. It is inevitable. One day you will either hand it off and someone else will lead it for you. You will sell, or maybe you'll just turn off the lights and say, we had a good run. It's time to close and this season is over for this business. But at some point, someday into the future, could be the not so distant future, that could be years from now. At some point, people are going to have to step aside. Where we struggle is we've never had that moment before, Antoinette. We've never had that moment where we said, okay, this is what my life is going to look like after I am done owning the identity that I have right now, which is as business owner, which is as business leader. And I think it's difficult for people to imagine what that life looks like. Therefore, it's hard to plan for a life that they can't envision and certainly don't feel comfortable with. So I think part of what holds owners back and leaders back is that when times are good, you don't want to leave. And when times are bad, it's really hard to. And someone else quoted that. That's not my quote, but the concept
Yeah.
is there, right? Why leave when things are good? And if things are bad, you
Yeah.
certainly can't step to the side.
So what about the identity? Because I see a lot of owners that their identity is really tied to the business. What does that look like in real life? How do they detach themselves from that?
It's a great question. I break it down into three parts. Part of it is the person, them imagining what their life looks like after they've left, imagining the things they're doing, the people that they're reconnecting with, the new identity that they'll be reborn into. Another is their people, and that's internal people and their external people, right? Their team, their leadership and management team, their employees, all of their staff, as well as their buyers, their customers, their clients, those loyal individuals that have looked to that business and leaned on it for so many years. It's hard to imagine those people looking at us as business owners and founders and saying, well, I've always counted on you. You've always been there for me, not just in payroll, but in leadership and in management and vision for the specific company. What do I do when you're gone? And that's a hard question to ask yourself as a leader. The third is the business. Again, imagining the business and imagining that it's been shaped around you because you're the founder or you're the leader for so long, right? And so much of what we see is people who are heading into their 60s and 70s and they've had their heads down for 30 or 40 years and they've said, this is my business, this is my life. They show up every day and they bleed their business. And what does it mean for them to step away from that? It's a hard moment to comprehend. So I think there's some hesitancy around what it is going to look like for people to actually live after that moment of transition. And it's one that people have had a hard time imagining and living into.
So when I was reading the book, you talk a lot about this leadership bench, and I thought that was kind of interesting, an analogy with sports and
Sure.
having people ready to lead. Talk a little bit about that, the importance of that.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many great lessons in sports because you can take a snapshot of a season, even a play. We often look at people as our examples and our archetypes of what it looks like to transition from leader to leader. And the two that I call on in the book, and I'm from New England, so it probably gives it away that
Oh,
I
yeah.
that I called on the New England Patriots and Tom Brady stepping in for an injured Drew Bledsoe years ago. He was an unknown. I think he was drafted in like the 6th round. His resume is out there in the interweb somewhere. And it was like, I play football at Michigan. I mean, who would have thought, right? This would be arguably arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. No offense to any of the 49er fans here, but he would have never gotten a chance had Drew Bledsoe gotten hurt. We may never know Tom Brady. And he was ready for that moment, and he was ready to lead. And I don't know enough about his preparation and his years in Michigan or his years as a benchmate to Drew Bledsoe, but I do know when he stepped in and he went into that huddle, the guys around him looked at him as a leader, and he filled that void that Bledsoe left. And then Bledsoe was done. We never heard about Drew Bledsoe again. And
Yeah.
there's funny memes about it, right? Because it was Tom Brady's time at his moment. And the other is trading Nomar Garciaparra in 2004. The Red Sox had made it to the ALCS in 2003, and they had lost in Game 7 on an Aaron Boone homer. And it was a devastating blow for the Red Sox, who have said, gosh, we haven't won a world championship like 86 years, whatever it was. We were so close. And they had their all-star Gold Glove centerpiece of the team, and they traded him. They traded him at the deadline, and everyone goes, what are you doing? You were so close. You have all the pieces. But that was the shift that was needed in order for everyone else to elevate. And then they won that year after 86 years. So these moments when people step aside, that's really when you have an opportunity for people to shine.
That's a great analogy. I love that. So for small businesses that don't have a full management team, what's the first step towards building one then?
Yeah, I mean, admitting that you don't have one, I think, is something that people often struggle with, right? If you think about folks who started their businesses in the 80s and bootstrapped them through the 90s into the tech revolution and don't necessarily use ChatGPT every day, these are people who have done a lot themselves. They're Jack and Jills of all trades. So they haven't necessarily looked around and cross-trained people with the idea that someday they're not going to be there. You're not required to have a board if you're a small business. You're not even required to have a CFO or a CHRO or a COO. So oftentimes you lean into and do all of those roles yourselves as an individual person. One of the key things is looking around and seeing what you don't have and having someone, a trusted advisor, a consultant, anybody to say, hey, here are the things that typically we see in businesses that transition well. Here are the things that you have. Where do you want to lean in? And oftentimes that's a leadership and management team. Those are protocols in place for the main individual to step back slowly, right? Not just throwing the keys one day and be gone, but slowly step back. And then the third is seeing the business and the trajectory of the business when that person is gone. And imagining those three components, a leadership team, that step back moment and the business forward moment, those three components I think are critical for anyone who's leading a business to make sure that they have in place. Even if they don't need to use them right now, they'll have them in their back pocket for when we know inevitably when it is time for them to step back and step out.
So what about a succession plan for family members? They have kids and they might take over. What advice do you have for them?
Watch HBO's 4 seasons of Succession. No, I'm kidding. Which is a great show. But if anyone's watching this and dealing in multiple billions, then good on you. And I'm sure that you'll have all the people in the world telling you what to do. No, it's a good question, Antoinette. And I think we've seen over the years, right? If we go back, I don't have the history on this, but let's just hypothesize. In the 50s and 60s, people went away to school or didn't, and they worked for the family business. They lived at home. They lived in their town. They didn't travel far and wide. Typically, they stayed close. Now, as we got forward to the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, someone said, I want to go to college and I don't want to come home and work on the farm. There's a big city that I want to go to. Have you heard of Google? And all of a sudden, people looked up and said, there's a big world out there and we can go and build a life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the street that you grew up on. So what we saw is a decline in family businesses being handed off and handed down generation to generation. And I think the current stat is only like 5 or 3% of businesses are in the 4th generation because everyone else has either folded or sold or had someone else externally come in and run it because they realize that their kids don't want to work for them. And it's nothing against my parents' generation or baby boomers or people who have worked really hard in the 80s and 90s. But there's a big world out there, and the expectation that we work for mom or dad or auntie or uncle is no longer there. And I think that both generations kind of realize that. People stopped coming home to the farm, and the folks started saying, wait a minute, we're going to have to look elsewhere. We can't just lean on nepotism or this lineage or our name to take this through to the next several generations, which is what makes a business that's run by multiple family generations so special. But they are definitely the exception and not the norm.
So you often see if the business is not going to be succeeded by the family member, then oftentimes what will happen is people wait until burnout, divorce, health issues, industry changes, and they're forced to sell. So what's the danger in waiting for that crisis to occur?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it happens to so many people. And I think whoever's watching this, if this has happened to you, I think you should reach out to Antoinette and share because this is something that we can learn from. And it's the what went wrong question. And it's when people look down and they look at their balance sheet and their income statement and they look at their payroll and they look at their life and they say, how did I get here? And it wasn't by accident. And there are tragedies that happen to people and there are circumstances that befall business leaders. But what I'm talking about is the individual who didn't plan and thought something was going to happen and then it didn't. And then they look up one day and say, gosh, I would have never imagined this. What people need to do is know that there is a likelihood that events in the tails of probability may and can happen. And if you plan for those, everything else under the bell curve is taken care of. And for people who are forced to sell, and I talk about this in my book, it's not on their terms now. And wouldn't you, as a business leader who's worked 40 years and everything about the company, you just breathe and bleed, wouldn't you want to hand that off and hand that over on your terms? And that's what we're talking about here. And that's what succession is really about. Exiting is about walking one way instead of the other and getting a check. That's about a number on a piece of paper. Succession really is about making sure that you have the pen to your own story and you are prepared mentally and emotionally and from a business sense to walk away and feel good about the moment you're doing so and on the terms on which and through which that moment is happening.
So, for an owner listening right now, what are the three things that they can do immediately to start planning a succession plan?
Yeah, good question. And for anyone who's listening, I encourage you to do one thing first is hold the mirror up to yourself and ask yourself, when is that moment? When is that date coming? And get clear and just get honest with yourself about it coming sometime into the future because it may be closer than you think. And it's really hard for people to support you if they don't know when that moment is happening. And even if you say it's 10 years from now or 5 years from now, at least people can start to rally around you and support you as you look out and over the horizon. Two is look around at your people internally and think about your team. Who do you have? Who don't you have? Where are the gaps? If tomorrow you couldn't come in and you had to just trust that this business was going to run, what do you need? And I think communicating that in a really honest way with the people around you, say, hey, I'm probably not going to live till I'm 100 or work till I'm 100. Apologies. I'm probably not going to work till I'm 100. So what do you think that we need to do? And you'd be so surprised, all of the people that come out and say, well, we need this, we need this. And all of a sudden you have a collaborative of people thinking about how to make that business better. And the third is thinking about the business. When you leave, that is when your real legacy is going to be defined. And what do you want the business to be when you leave? And starting to think about the components, the X's and O's, the operational tactics that need to be undertaken. Think about what those are in order to put those into place, or even just put them down on a piece of paper so that you know. So one is mirror to yourself, two is your people around you, and three is your business and the trajectory that you want to see it beyond when you leave. And I think if you start asking yourself those questions, you will begin to crystallize a plan and understand that the moment is coming, and you'll feel so much better about having thought about it.
That's awesome. And is there one special message that you have for business owners from your own experience or anything that you can think of? I know I'm catching you off guard with that.
No, not at all. Not at all. It would be to ensure that you don't miss the opportunity to write your own succession story. Do not miss that opportunity. Do not wait. No one is going to write that plan for you. Make sure that you are the author of your own story and bring in the advisors and the advice that you need in order to look back and say, I'm so glad that I did it that way.
Thanks for being with us, Alex. Can you also share how can we order your book or get in contact with you to plan a succession plan for
Sure.
the future?
I'm easy to find. You can Google Alex Teece, and I think my email, my phone number, probably my social security, height, weight, all comes up on the top of Google. I'm really easy to find. AlexTeeceConsulting.com, LinkedIn. And then the book is on Amazon. And you can pop onto Amazon and just type in surviving succession. It will come up. I think it has 5 stars because I wrote a review for it and I asked my sister to write a review for it. So it should have 5 stars and 2 reviews. And grab a copy. And yeah, please feel free to reach. I'm happy to grab a coffee or hop on a Zoom with anyone who's saying, gosh, I've worked really hard and I'm not sure what to do next. Happy to think through those things.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks, Alex. Don't forget to hit subscribe. We talk every week about selling businesses, increasing your profit, and setting you up for retirement or your next move.